coming up next. Stay tuned to learn more about the state of the art in blockchain and cryptocurrency technology. Reimagine 2020.
Hi everyone, I'm Artur from Mousebelt, and with me we have right now a very exciting guest. We have Dale from FedEx. I'll let you go introduce yourself.
Hi everyone, Dale Chrystie, business fellow, blockchain strategist from FedEx. I'm domiciled in Memphis, Tennessee, where FedEx is headquartered.
Thank you. So Gil, I know a little bit about you. I know you do a 60-second recap of the last 5 years of blockchain. Would you mind sharing that with us?
Sure, I'd be happy to. It's just been such a long journey. I thought I'd have a little fun and boil it down to just the kind of the essential elements. So so here we go. We're all going to get rich with Bitcoin. What's blockchain? Can I sprinkle some blockchain dust on something and it will grow 6 feet tall? 3 of us have a blockchain use case, and we're going to sign non-disclosures, and we're going to create a consortium. Then we're going to treat blockchain like the internet and immediately monetize it. Sorry, what's blockchain? We're going to wait until someone figures out blockchain, and then we'll jump on board. A smart contract is neither smart nor a contract. My business connects supply and demand. Peer-to-peer technology won't affect us. I don't mind co-opetition in the blockchain space as long as I don't have to work with other companies. So there's blockchain in 60 seconds.
Okay, that quite well put. Where would you put FedEx in that sort of timeline?
Well, we've been public for a long time, a couple of years or longer, that we think blockchain is going to completely change worldwide supply chains. We also don't think we can put a FedEx logo on it and have the world embrace it, which is a bit of an unusual approach at the enterprise level. We also don't think the consortium model will scale in the global commerce space, and then an open platform is inevitable. The global commerce space consists of tens of thousands of companies, from air cargo all the way to bicycle delivery. And contrary to the consortium model, if you hang an Apache or an MIT open source license on the door and only allow those in the room who agree to use it, you just scaled globally. We think it's going to take a while, but that's how we think it'll play itself out. We also think that regulatory agencies should mandate blockchain on the horizon so we can work together to build it. Where we can reduce friction across borders, that's delays and resources and all kinds of things, we all win.
And so if we just go a little bit back into the history lesson. So you mentioned that one of the steps was to wait until someone else figures it out. So can you elaborate a bit on that? Because I think this has been sort of also the sort of the public perception of how corporates have at some point viewed all this.
Yeah, I mean, blockchain is not yet very fast or very scalable or very mature. However, what it does really, really well. And where authenticity is critical, we believe it's going to be transformative. Increasingly in this day and age, especially in the moment we're in right now, consumers will want to have full transparency upstream for the products we buy, the food we consume. This is especially true for things like pharmaceuticals, healthcare, food, global clearance. Counterfeit goods continue to grow globally. And so the authenticity piece becomes very, very important. And to wait around on transformative technology like this is not going to be a good strategic decision from our point of view.
And you mentioned that smart contracts, not smart nor contracts. What was that was another point of the timeline.
Yeah, one of our lawyers actually said that, and I quote it all the time because it's perfect. Just one example of a smart contract is in e-commerce. There's a physical product. There will also be a digital version or a digital twin of that. If you think of an e-commerce customer, I'll name her Beth. She can be both a human and a machine. And these smart contract machines are the next big consumer class. And many of them will have wallets. So within a few years, there could potentially be 1,000 machines for every Beth. And the smart contract, while it may not be neither smart nor a contract, is going to be, again, transformative, because there will be, hundreds and thousands of them for individual transactions, and they'll repeat and repeat and repeat. So you better be very careful what you put in the smart contracts, because they're going to be doing all kinds of things for us. And as I said, they will also, in many cases, have a wallet.
I see. Okay, and but what was the what was the point around if a business connects by supply to demand? That how do you fit peer-to-peer into that?
Yeah, I mean, if you think of supply and demand, all kinds of businesses and industries are actually based on that. I have something, you want something, or vice versa. And in many cases, it's an algorithm that sits between the two of us and basically plays matchmaker. You need something, I have something, neither one of us knows how to reach the other, and then you've got the whole trust thing going on. Again, at its most basic, it's you and me. And in some cases, there are multiple people across, where you're located right now, where I'm located on the other side of the world. To get something between the two of us takes multiple parties, multiple middlemen scenarios. And, peer-to-peer technology means that if you and I can find each other and do so in a trusted environment like blockchain, we may not need someone or maybe multiple people sitting between the two of us. And that's why, although in the previous comment, although blockchain is not yet really very mature or fast or scalable at the enterprise level, you don't want to wait a few more years to figure it out, because somebody will, and you don't want to be late to that game. Said another way, in a blockchain world, the answer to the kind of look yourself in the mirror question, what value do you provide, may be different than your current business model. If you're used to, I can connect people and I'll always be able to connect people, you need to understand this technology, because if you and I can find each other and do so, again, in a trusted environment like blockchain, we're not going to need the traditional middlemen. And so, FedEx is in a middleman position in some of the business models and some of the things that we have. And it's not a matter of just folding your arms and saying, this won't affect me. I'll just ignore this. I think you ignore it at your own peril.
It's very interesting, and I think a lot of people would be very interested to know, like, where to understand where is you talked about the maturity of the technology. Where is the maturity of the blockchain technology in the eyes of for someone such as FedEx? Because given that, I would say that to put the significant portion of essentially the world economy through it, it needs to be a extremely reliable, right?
Well, again, it's not yet very fast or scalable or mature. So we are, we go to 220 countries and territories. We have the most robust databases and systems in the world, as do many other multinationals. It just has to be. It has to be very robust. It has to do those things. And I think part of my kind of fun history lesson was that everybody said, let's just jump to this right now. Well, even today, if you need to connect dots from a data point of view, in almost no cases is blockchain the initial answer. In most cases, there's a database that's going to do it better, quicker, more ruggedized, more stable than blockchain. So a lot of people spent a number of years kind of starting with blockchain, and that's my kind of joking reference to, can I sprinkle a little blockchain dust on this and it'll grow 6 feet tall? No, you really can't. It's really very specific technology, and we think there are some amazing use cases out there that are going to come from that point of view. And so that's this delicate balance between not yet and don't be late to the game. I mean, those are contradictory comments from that point of view, but they are both true comments, which is, you don't want to be late to the game, because peer-to-peer technology is going to be transformative. And again, if you and I can find each other in a trusted environment, we may not need some of the traditional middlemen. On the other hand, it's not yet really very mature technology, but you need to keep your fingers on the pulse of that And that's what we are doing. And so again, we believe that where authenticity matters, things like pharmaceuticals and healthcare and medical devices and global clearance, we think that's going to be very transformative from that point of view. And 10 years from now, let's just say it this way: a 10-year-old will never probably hear the word blockchain. They may never even hear that reference because it's simply going to be a layer under everything. 20 years ago, we talked about the internet. We put the word internet in front of everything. And now we don't. It just is. Blockchain is just simply going to be this layer of this layer of authenticity underneath everything that's going to get to secure online identity and e-voting and e-passports and open commerce globally and various things like that. It's not that exciting from a use case point of view, and certainly people 10 years from now aren't going to be discussing the relative merits of it. It's just going to exist. Right now, though, these are the early days, and where that applies to you from a peer-to-peer technology or otherwise, we think it's very interesting technology, especially in global commerce and in the supply chain globally.
I see. But for something like this transformative, if you mentioned, like, where should this kind of like initiative actually come from in the case of like a large corporate such as FedEx? Like, is it sort of bottom up or top down, or how do you see it?
Well, we've publicly said we don't think we can put a FedEx logo on this technology and have the world come to it. I mean, we've been dabbling in this technology, but the broader piece is that there's kind of a fork in the road from a blockchain point of view. One fork, and again, I had a little bit of fun with that early on. One of the forks in the road is that you and I and two other people, we've got some smart people. If we could get a little money, we could build something to get a few customers. And so, we start with 4 people, and then by the time you get to 5 or 6 or 7 or 10 or 20 or even 50 or 100, it may take you, a year or two between all the legal documents to sign and all the, well, he doesn't want this or she doesn't want that or whatever the case may be. And again, in our global commerce space, in the global supply chain space, it's tens of thousands of entities, all the way from people like FedEx or UPS or DHL or others to a bicycle delivery. And so it has to work for everybody. And so the other fork in the road, if you work through the trajectory of that and say, how long will it take the world to grow from a consortia point of view? It's a relatively flat line. If you say, okay, let's hang an MIT license or an Apache open source license on the door and say, can anybody come, anybody who agrees to that can come in, it just scaled globally. And so the trajectory on that one actually goes much, much quicker to adoption. And so that's where we believe this moves forward. A lot of people are still trying to solve it through a consortium model, but ultimately our default position, I've spent a lot of years in process improvement and quality and strategy and things like that. And a lot of times you kind of take something and put it under the microscope and really crank it down and look at that at kind of a root cause level and an individual kind of unit level. But sometimes, just sometimes, it's easier to actually pull back from something. And so our default position is essentially the International Space Station. And when you pull back and look up at a 220 country territory network like we have, excuse me, there's no company, there's no FedEx, there's no industry, there's no borders. This data is all going to ultimately connect. And so while consortium models may be successful in some cases, in some industries, there's some good examples of some of those things. We actually think in the global commerce space, we think it's going to be open. And we think the sooner that everybody can kind of understand the pot of gold at the end of the rainbow, we think it's going to be an open, kind of a non-competitive layer. And then from that, we will all be able to do things on top of that. But we don't think we can skip that step. We don't think we can treat this like the internet and just jump to let's monetize it and let's slap our logos on it and move on.
That's very interesting to hear such a a large corporate sort of speak about or sort of share the mindset of the openness, the necessity of it. I find that sort of very, very fascinating. But how would one, like you mentioned, 220 countries? How does one even start to sort of hypothetically even apply this sort of technology? What would it sort of would you focus on sort of like you mentioned specific sort of lines such as healthcare, pharmaceuticals, and so on, or is it country, or how does it even sort of just to sort of to help our audience kind of like have some sort of mental image?
Well, again, we think it's a technology discussion, but we don't think it's only a technology discussion. And so, that leads me to comments that I make about the C-suite. And let me loop back through there, because I think that may connect to this, which is, a lot of companies would find some single evangelist who's really kind of all in on blockchain, and they wear people out talking only about blockchain, et cetera, et cetera. Well, in any conference materials I cover, I start with quotes from our corner office, from our chairman, Fred Smith, and our chief information officer, Rob Carter, where we talk about it being, completely changing worldwide supply chains. And for blockchain to be transformative, we think it has to be bigger than us. So that's the technology discussion. But at the C-suite discussion, the C-suite is really focused on risk and opportunity. That person is an expert in their field, finance or innovation or IT or whatever the case may be, but they also broadly are responsible for risk and opportunity. And so let's go down the risk and opportunity side of things. And so rather than me trying to be that evangelist where I'm trying to convince you of the inherent goodness of this new technology that's not intuitive, and it's not, it's kind of mysterious and scary and we're not quite sure about it. Let's just put you back in your comfort zone as a C-suite, a member of the C-suite, which is as a chief financial officer, those smart contracts we talked about are going to be transformative. Because in the e-commerce example we talked about, the CFO is going to recognize a micropayment of net 0 days rather than net 30 or net 60 days. And now you just got their attention, right? That's a fundamentally different way to think of something like accounts receivable. The CIO is going to need people to code those smart contracts. They may or may not have those in place. The chief legal officer is going to need bilingual attorneys, essentially fluent in both paper contracts and smart contracts. And as I mentioned a few minutes ago, we better like how those contracts were coded, because they're going to be used hundreds and thousands of times. And so we're halfway around the C-suite right now, and those examples mean that, again, while blockchain is a technology discussion, it's also a strategic discussion for the C-suite, especially around things like smart contracts and peer-to-peer technology. And to finish that point, I think one way to approach this would be to charge someone in your organization, if you were a C-suite member, charge somebody in your organization with exploring blockchain within your company or your industry and report back to the C-suite. And from there, that discussion can quickly move from assessing risk and opportunity essentially into the strategic portfolio discussion. And now it's not as mysterious. Now it's just part of our business model. And where are we strong? Where are our risks or our opportunities? And how can this change us, or will this change us? And we think it's one of those disrupt or be disrupted. So again, ignore this kind of technology essentially at your own peril.
And when did FedEx sort of embark on this sort of the C-suite sort of the process?
Well, I was working on the first use case at one of our operating companies several years ago in the dispute resolution side of things in the big box retail space. So it was a very simple three-party scenario. You purchased something from party B. They fulfilled it and gave it to me, and I delivered it to you. Part of the problem was that you and the other party were speaking in a purchase order language, and that party and we were speaking in a bill of lading language, and I delivered it to you on a bill of lading. And as simple as that sounds, here's how that gets twisted. You order 100 items, so you are party A from party B on a purchase order. Party B now fulfills it, but only 40 of those items can fit on a pallet on a skid to be unitized. And they put it on a pallet and they shrink wrap it, and they do that again. And now I get a bill of lading for 2 pallets of 40 each for a total of 80. And I have no idea how many you actually ordered, right? All I know is that I was given a bill of lading for 2 pallets. I delivered them to you exactly as I picked them up. I mean, you can also translate this into a lot of different examples. Food delivery, right? I don't know what you ordered. All I know is that they put it in a paper bag and they stapled it and I handed it to you. And now I mean, I don't know if there's an egg roll in there. I don't know what kind of pizza you ordered. I don't know anything about it. I simply gave it to you as it was given to me. And so, unfortunately, in our case, that was a couple of $1 million of claims and disputes. And as it turns out, between party A and party B in that example, it was north of $20 million a year, just in chargebacks and discrepancies and kind of dispute resolution types of issues. And so while that was a very simple little connection from that point of view, it proved out blockchain. Yes, it works. Yes, we can do that. And basically what it got us to was a common language. If we could boil that down to SKU or serial number rather than some what's in a box, what's on a skid, something like that, we could actually get it down to a common language. And essentially it also taught us about a secure chain of custody. And so, but the real aha moment for me from a FedEx point of view was really an example like you and I, where we are literally across the world from each other right now. And if you ship something, if you and I ship something between each other, it would take multiple parties, brokers, forwarders, brother-in-law, I know a lady, there's all kinds of people that sit between you and me in that supply and demand. At a FedEx level, 220 countries, that was my aha moment, which is if you and I can find each other and do so in a trusted environment, we may not need one or more of those middle parties. And so, leaning this back to your earlier question about how do you get it started, where do you go, what do you do, and some of those kinds of things. Actually, as I said, in some cases, thinking bigger may actually be helpful. Certainly drilling down into something and getting it down to the little details and the root cause and things like that certainly is helpful. But in a case like this, we're working with people like U.S. Customs. We've done a couple of proofs of concept with U.S. Customs. We're working on another one with them at this point in time. And we are also involved at the World Customs Organization and World Trade Organization level from that point of view. One of the things that most people probably wouldn't understand or wouldn't be aware of is that we're part of a trade association that only has 3 members, FedEx, UPS, and DHL. And where we can reduce friction across borders, we win, our customers win, and global trade also wins. And so that trade organization last year, we actually worked on a position paper together that was provided to World Customs late last year, and then I provided it. I was presented at World Trade Organization in December, presented it to them as well. And so it's not about where we compete; it's about where we can agree. And in this case, all 3 entities agree that where we can reduce friction across borders, it's a good thing for everyone. And so we have to start somewhere, but we're starting big. Again, starting one little piece at a time, we don't think scales very well globally. And certainly when we think internally about what shadow do we cast from a FedEx point of view, it's a big shadow, right? We go literally around the world. We go everywhere you can go, basically. And so we're starting big. We were part of a pilot with the U.S. FDA, Federal Drug Administration. We've done a couple of pilots with U.S. Customs, et cetera.
Wow, that's very exciting. You've also spoken about the sort of the importance of standardization in the space. Can you just elaborate a bit more on that?
Yeah, I think in some cases we're trying to do too much. Back to the previous point, we're trying to do too much too many little things in this space. If we think, of some things that have been very transformative, very small things can be transformative. In some, I've got a slide in my conference material that simply has a lowercase a and a capital A on it, and it takes up the entire slide. There it is, the letter A. Think how transformative the letter A was, really, from that point of view. I mean, all the way from weights and measures 5,000 years ago, to screws, to telegraph networks, to electrical measurement, to railroads, the width of railroad, ties, to the alphabet. And the reason I say that is the more common, so standardized, the more common, the more people that use it, the more companies who create things around it, all of which leads to enhanced network effects and increased adoption.
Hmm. And so I do know there's another topic which you or a phrase which isn't very commonly used is co-op petition. What is it, and why is it important?
You know, I started off. We tried to solve blockchain all by itself, right? We tried to figure out how to do it, and it becomes this technology discussion, and we talked about that. But once we got into kind of some higher thinking about that and realized that we aren't going to be able to do this on our own, and where does this scale? At what point does this get to scale? I kind of started referring to blockchain as a team sport. And early on, people didn't quite get that. They didn't understand that you and I, again, it's not where we compete. It's about where we can agree. And so that kind of led to the reference to coopetition. And so if open is inevitable, and we believe that it is inevitable, then we need to change our default thinking around working together on something like this. Again, where can we agree? Not that long ago, again, now very topical in time, and in a few months, literally in a few months, you and I could have been kind of arguing across the back fence in our backyards about our favorite sports teams or about something else. And today we're literally working globally to help each other and others in need. And we're seeing that kind of shared purpose, or as I call it, the coopetition, happening in real time in this moment. We think blockchain will work the same way. We believe all of us will cooperate to develop the non-competitive, open source platform on which blockchain will be based in the global commerce space. And again, if the longer we stay on the consortium model, that trajectory is a much flatter, longer trajectory. The sooner we can understand that, look, it's not about where you and I compete. We may be FedEx, UPS, DHL, or maybe two big pharmaceutical companies or something along those lines. However, two pharmaceutical companies who are fierce competitors, where can they agree? Well, they can agree that the gray market, the counterfeit market is working against them, right? Is taking business share from them. So the two of us as big pharma companies could work together to move our product into a blockchain scenario where authenticity exists, which now forces the gray market or the black market essentially to do one of two things: either rise to that same level or get out. And so while it's not intuitive and it's not currently taught in business school or on your first day of orientation, employee orientation, the fact is that two big pharma companies, or FedEx, UPS, and DHL, there are areas where we can agree, and more, I believe that we will carve out that space. What we are currently seeing in the world in this moment is that certainly people are working together who never would have thought of working together in the past, but based on whatever that kind of shared purpose is. In this case, it may be a pandemic or something related to that, but from a business point of view, there's a lot of areas where we can actually work together to the benefit of all, and that's where coopetition comes from.
Very interesting. So I guess the average person I think views or sees essentially FedEx. Their interaction with FedEx is essentially receiving their, let's say, AirPods or a MacBook through the mail, and I think very few people can actually sort of imagine what the sort of the end-to-end process is behind that. So coming back to the coopetition, how much interaction is there, or sort of necessary cooperation is there in today's format of the world of logistics between the FedExes and the UPSs and DHLs in the world? So is this the coopetition? Is it something like a complete day and night sort of shift, or is it finally there's like a common direction to work together on? Or
well, I think people would be surprised at how many what you would consider as traditional competitors, again, not where we compete, but where can we agree. So we could have conversations, or you and I as big pharma companies or others could talk about things like safety. That's not antitrust, that's not anything. And certainly we are all very sensitive to antitrust laws, and we would never go down even close to that line in the sand. But this is really not in that same vein. If we believe that blockchain is going to be a non-competitive open source platform layer, then I mean we can think of a phone that I have that would be an Android platform that's open, but you and I could build an app on top of that that is proprietary. And so we just don't think we can skip that step. We don't think we can, again, if we built a FedEx global blockchain solution, we don't think our competitors would pay to use it and vice versa. And that's what led us down this kind of deeper thought process, which is we actually think it's a non-competitive open source platform. And once that platform's out there, everybody will be able to contribute and do what they need to do and potentially make proprietary solutions on top of that. But there's a lot of that goes on. There's a lot of trade associations, and again, it's really not an antitrust discussion. Certainly, we are all very sensitive to that. It really is where can we agree? And again, as I word it, where we can reduce friction across borders, we all win. And so we can't wait for U.S. Customs or some other customs to solve this for us, nor can we solve it and expect our competitors to jump on that and pay us for that. That's why we think we need to go shoulder to shoulder on this and really kind of parse out that's antitrust, that's way on the other side of some conversation, and we're nowhere near that. However, if this is a non-competitive layer that we're working on, the sooner we can all figure that out. I mean, it's whatever even if competitors got together and built that layer and it didn't fit with the government, it wouldn't work. If we wait for the government to build it, it won't work, et cetera, et cetera. So if you eliminate all those possibilities, we think what we get to is this is a non-competitive layer that the sooner we can all sit down and start working on, the sooner we can actually scale globally to the benefit of all.
Interesting. And so I guess I'm sorry. I guess we don't have too much of your time left. But to the thousands of students listening and thinking about a career, looking at a career in blockchain. So whether they're CS majors, lawyers, or finance professionals, and so on, what would your sort of words of advice be to them?
Well, again, I think there are two paths. We've talked about the technology. Certainly, there's a technology answer to that gets you to coding of smart contracts and against basically the dev world from a blockchain point of view. Again, we think a lot of this is going to be in the open dev world. So certainly, that for the technology students out there, absolutely, that's one of the highest jobs. In terms of need right now is in the blockchain development side of things. So certainly if that is your interest, then go down that path. But I'm not on the technology side of things. I'm on the business and strategy side of things. And I would tell you that for your legal students and for your business students and your supply chain students and all the rest of those kinds of things, I would go back to the C-suite discussion, which is, we think it is a technology discussion, but it's not only a technology discussion. A lot of this is about culture and change management. How are we going to work together in this new world? How can we work as a team? I mean, here we are having a global conference virtually, right? There's all kinds of things that we can do if we decide to do those things. And so be willing to learn that and be willing to think of this in a business sense as well. And where are those opportunities? I mean, again, if you and I can find each other and do so in a trusted environment across the world, this kind of technology will help us with that. So the legal students, as I said, I think the chief legal officer needs to be prepared for essentially bilingual attorneys that are fluent in both paper contracts and smart contracts. And most of the companies that I know of are not yet there. They may be talking about that or may be aware of that, but certainly from a student point of view, those are helpful skills. But again, this is just business. You know, as I said, 10 years from now, you're not going to put the word blockchain in front of anything. This is just business. And where we can reduce friction in business processes, all kinds of opportunities exist. So if you want to do that, that will change the world. Right? I mean, this technology we think is going to get us to essentially a near real-time supply chain, where when you start mixing sensors with blockchain, all kinds of things are possible. I now know where all my product is. I can move it more quickly. I can reduce the number of handoffs. I mean, if you think right now of some scenario like in the U.S. where somebody has a flood and they're handing sandbags one to the other. You've got this whole lineup of people, I'm handing it to you, you're handing it to somebody else. That's what a lot of these business processes look like right now. And where you can think differently as a student and as a future leader in that space, where you can think differently and say, wait a second, there's a better way to do this rather than having all these people hand off all these things separately to each other. That's transformative. And you can be that person that can be transformative coming out with whatever your interest is, whether that's a supply chain background or a business background or a legal background or a dev background or some combination thereof. Or maybe a dev and lawyer and legal background or something. You're limited only to your own imagination and where this technology can take you in terms of these existing processes. But we think this is a transformative time for many of these business processes right now. So I think your timing right now as a student is fantastic.
Thank you so much for that. And there we have it. We've heard it. And so thank you so much. We have Dale Chrystie from FedEx. We really appreciate you for taking the time. And let's hope we can all work together on reimagining 2020. It seems like it's about
absolutely
time for that.
Absolutely. It's been my pleasure.
Ours as well. Thank you.
Stay tuned to learn more about the state of blockchain education at major universities all around the world. Reimagine 2020.